Good morning, dear members, on joining this session on this Sunday morning. Thank you, Rajgopal Menon sir and Saudamini ma'am for accepting our invitation for today's VCM. I'm sure everyone is excited for today's VCM. There was a lot of knowledge which was required to update कि क्रिप्टो करेंसी है क्या, बिटकॉइन का सुनते हैं सब ऊपर नीचे जा रहा है, ऐसा हुआ है वैसा हुआ है. सो आज हमें पता चलेगा एग्जैक्टली है क्या है. So before starting with the VCM, I would like to give introduction for our respective speakers today. I'll start with Mr. Rajgopal Menon sir. He's a Vice President Marketing of Wazirex, India's largest cryptocurrency exchange. Before that, he was a AVP for Reliance Jio. He was a part of a crack team that launched Jio.com, through which the company launched its 4G services. Prior to his Jio stint, he was a CEO of StepOut.com, India's #1 dating company, which was eventually acquired by Tinder. He has spent over 12 years at Games to Win Group across companies in different capacities. As a domain expert, his articles have appeared in Economic Times, Hindustan Times, Hindu Business Line, Times of India, and several other publications. With this great, massive experience, so I would like to welcome Menon sir. He's no less than a hidden celebrity, I guess, because all the major landmark events he has been part, biggest being the Reliance Jio launch. So welcome, sir. We also have CA Saudamini Chandrana ma'am. She's a chartered accountant by profession, a writer by choice, and an educator by interest. Currently, she's the editor at Wazirex, India's largest cryptocurrency exchange. Before Wazirex, she has worked with EY, ClearTax, and Masters India. She completed her articleship from Kamath and Rao, Chartered Accountants at Mangalore, and she is qualified in November 2017. At her home branch, Mangalore, as a part of a core team of SIC ACA, she was the first editor of the e-newsletter. So, welcome, CA Saudamini ma'am. Thank you for joining us today. So,
thank you for having us.
You can take over. Yes, thank you, dear members, for joining.
Thanks, Pankaj, for that wonderful introduction. Good to be here, guys. In this, typically I think we'll have about 1.5 hours, 2 hours, depending upon how interested I keep you on how interesting your Sunday is. This is by no means, don't take this as, the be all and end all of crypto. What Saudamini and I plan to do is give you literally a teaser into crypto. There will be many jump off points. What we hope to do is start, you guys are creme de la creme, the best business, the best brains in finance. If we can get some of you to think about crypto, we'll consider our job well done. This, my presentation was pretty extensive from a theoretical point of view also, but thanks to Saudamini, we've trimmed it down considerably. And we made it very, very practical, so that, it'll answer your basic questions, solve a few misconceptions that you have, remove them if possible. And then we can have a Q&A if time permits at the end of it all. So here goes. One second, my screen, yeah. So let's start off with money. And why is it different from currency? I'll start off with a video. Tell me if you can hear it.
Is that people do not understand the difference between currency.
Can you hear the voice?
Yes.
Saudamini, yeah. Okay.
Currency.
Yes, sir.
Money. Currency is a medium of exchange, a unit of account. It is portable, durable, divisible, and something called fungible. Fungible means that each unit is the same as the next unit. $1 in my pocket buys the same amount as $1 in your pocket. Money is all of those things plus a store of value over a long period of time. Even financial planners, bankers, your accountant, they don't understand the difference between currency and money. The currency in your pocket is a medium of exchange. It's a unit of account because it's got numbers on it. It's somewhat durable, it's portable, it's divisible in that you can make change, and it's fungible. A dollar in my pocket buys the same amount as a dollar in your pocket. But because governments can print more and more and more of it and dilute the currency supply, it's continually transferring wealth out of your pocket, out of your bank account, to the government and to the banking system.
So I guess this is just a trailer about what money does and the difference between money and currency. So the genesis of cryptocurrency. So let's be very clear. Internet money or digital cash or whatever form of money, that the next generation of money, the ideas have been floating for a long time, right? From the 70s to the 80s, you had digital cash, different forms of it. But what happened, there were two catalysts that happened that actually gave rise to the birth of Bitcoin. So in 2007 and 8, we had the huge crisis, the financial crisis that wreaked havoc in Wall Street and in the financial circles in the United States. So, the numerous banks, the Lehman's collapsed, different banks collapsed. What happened was that for the first, I think this was the first major bailout that happened for the financial sector. There were bailouts before, but in this magnitude of scale, so $700 billion worth of bailout was there. So that set a lot of people, a lot of conservative economists, monetary experts thinking that how is the United States or how is the world ever going to pay for it, right? So that was the genesis, that was the starting point. And then there was someone called Satoshi Nakamoto who released something called a white paper, a Bitcoin white paper way back in 2008. And he said he's releasing this digital cash or this internet money called Bitcoin, and lo behold, this thing was released in 2009.
Is that
So if you look at the biggest innovations in finance, according to me, have been the invention of double entry bookkeeping, which you guys are very, very familiar with. And the history is that, before the advent of double entry bookkeeping, entries were all descriptive. I bought 100 rupees of bananas from Pankaj. Sadamni gave me 300 rupees of coconuts. It was all very descriptive. Double entry bookkeeping eliminated the need for descriptive entries, and it was widely adopted by the Italian traders at that time, and it got institutionalized by the first bank in Italy. This is, it's called the Medici's Bank. I don't know if you're aware of it, but these guys were the pioneer of double entry bookkeeping. And then the world adopted it, and it spread like wildfire across the world, and of course gave birth to chartered accountants. But on a more serious note, the second big innovation, according to me, was the issuance of shares of the British East India Company. So this is the first time. So, they wanted to trade with India, enterprising bunch of people. It was this was the first instance of a private entity raising money. So they went door to door and raised money for the British East India Company. It became immensely, profitable, and the rest is history. Now, we believe that blockchain and Bitcoin are the next big innovation in finance. Okay, so it's taken a long while for this to happen. And why are we so bullish about it? Why is there so much hoo-ha about it is what this presentation is about. So let's just dive into blockchain. What is blockchain? Blockchain is nothing but a ledger. Okay, this ledger contains a history of every single transaction that has ever taken place in that ledger. Okay, and this ledger is present on a network of computers across the world. So you and I can have a copy of the ledger. Okay, it's just like if you remember, Sean Parker, and he started the entire craze of MP3s. It's like torrent. It's all over the world. It's a distributed ledger. It's transparent, and everyone has a copy of that ledger. So what happens is that the innovation that the blockchain did was that how do you add entries into that ledger? So you have some people called the miners who are designated to forge or mine the next block. How do they mine the next block? They have to solve a complicated computer problem. And this computer problem uses brute force. So it'll get a little technical, but I'm trying to keep it very simple. to solve that computer problem. What this does is that it allows for the network to be completely secure. Okay, it cannot, no one can, so you and I cannot just, you have to have mining farms that have the ability to compute that amount of computing force to forge the next block. So what is the next block? The block is just a page of transactions. So and then this block gets attached to the previous block. And then once that block is complete, miners compete again to forge the next block in the blockchain. And as I mentioned, the blockchain is present, and once the blocks are forged, it gets all the ledgers across the world get updated with the new entries. So what happens is that it becomes immutable, it becomes unchanging, you cannot change it, you cannot tinker with it, you can't make any changes with it. It is immensely secure. The Bitcoin network has never been hacked since 2009, since inception. So never in the history of mankind has a computer network never been able to been able to be hacked. So Bitcoin does that. And how does it do that? It's through cryptography. So it solves a lot of multiple problems. And the miners, once they compete and forge a block, they get rewarded in Bitcoin. So that's how the entire ecosystem works. The blockchain is distributed across the ledger, the miners across the world, the miners compete and forge the next blocks. For that, they get rewarded in Bitcoin. So how does it work? A wants to send money to B, it online, okay? And then what happens is that the transaction is broadcast everywhere to the network. Then what happens is that miners see the transactions, they compete, they order the transactions, put it into the next block, and the block is forged, and the ledger is updated, and of course the money gets transferred from A to B. It's as simple as that. But this is what I'm making it sound very simple, but Bitcoin solves a number of critical problems. One is the double spending problem. So this is the biggest problem that Bitcoin solved, because this is digital money, right? Anything digital can be replicated multiple times, right? Your movies can be replicated, and image can be replicated. So if I send Pankaj, I can send Pankaj multiple digital money, right? So what Bitcoin does is that the miners make sure that Raj A has the amount of money to transfer to Pankaj. So the miners forge it into the Bitcoin network, into the ledger network. And then they say that, okay, fine, Raj has paid Pankaj, both the ledgers get updated, and thus solving the double spending problem. I'm making it simple, but that's how it works. There is also cryptography, which makes the network secure. There is also game theory. There is also a very critical computer science problem that got solved, which is called the Byzantine general problem. So just look it up. I'm throwing a lot of names at you, but the idea is to just keep it very simple and, help you guys to just understand what to look for when you are reading up about Bitcoin. So I've given you a teaser about what blockchain is and what Bitcoin is, but what are the practical applications? What is happening? So we've done multiple COVID test reports, right? Now, how can you have a sense of records of all the records that were negative, that cannot be manipulated, that are immutable? Okay, so the Maharashtra government has tied up an issue with a private company, and it issues COVID certificates which are forged onto the blockchain. So every negative test report is actually on the blockchain. Indian telcos have also started using blockchain. So if you noticed, the number of spam calls have come down. They have not eliminated it, but I think we used to get dozens of phone calls. It's come down mercifully to a handful of them now, and that is also because of blockchain. Sahyadri Farms is a farmers cooperative based out of Nasik. So what you can do is that anytime you buy it out of any farm produce that you buy out of Sahyadri Farm, it tells you from which farmer it was procured from. It gives you the details, how much it was paid for, and so on and so forth. The entire supply chain metrics can be captured in the blockchain, and it can be accessed by end users like you and me, through just by scanning a QR code. Also, banks in India have come together and they have formed a new company. So it's just like how UPI is. You have NCPI and all the banks that have, cooperating to make Bheem and other Bheem available to you. Similarly, they're doing something similar with blockchain. And this is called the Indian Blockchain Infrastructure Company. which will develop solutions for banks using the blockchain. So anything that requires reconciliation, anything that requires auditing, all those problems can be fixed solving blockchain, because it's a public ledger and it is available to computers across the world. But when I say public ledger, that is the perfect version of the blockchain. Okay, that is, those are the biggest blockchains in the world. But suppose you are a private company and you want a blockchain solution. A lot of companies are developing solutions which are hybrid. So there could be some data that is proprietary to the company that they do not want to release to the world, that they keep secure and they keep hidden, and they tie up with a public blockchain, and information that can be shared can be shared on a public blockchain. So there's a hybrid blockchain model also, which is being pioneered by a lot of companies. So in essence, what is crypto? Crypto is digital. Okay, crypto is cryptocurrency, which is secured by cryptography, and I've just told you what it is all about. It has no physical form. You never have notes. You never have LCs. You never have documents. It's a computer program at the end of the day, and it is completely decentralized. So the beauty about cryptocurrency and the beauty of blockchain and Bitcoin is that it's completely decentralized. So you might have heard multiple reports of China banning blockchain. Okay. But China has been banning blockchain for the last, I think every year they ban blockchain and it affects the price of Bitcoin. But this time they appear to be pretty serious, because they've stamped out all the mining operations out of China, and all of that is moved to the United States. So they are doing that in order to promote the yuan central bank digital currency. That's a discussion for another day. But if you ask me, can Bitcoin be banned? It will come up in a future slide. But Bitcoin can be banned. It cannot be banned by any government. Governments can make it difficult for you and me to access Bitcoin. But just like how Pirate Bay, the site that gives you free movies on torrents, cannot be banned, and it's been banned in multiple times. Why can't it be banned? Because it's decentralized. You kill one site, 100 new sites pop up. So Bitcoin is somewhat similar. It's decentralized, it's peer-to-peer, and it's available on every node on the network. So I've just covered that. I'm sorry, I missed this part, but I think this is just a visual representation that I just spoke to you about. So what are the most common myths about cryptocurrency? It's illegal. Of course, it's not illegal. In India, it's not illegal. It's not illegal. It has been, it's unregulated. It's a gray area. There is no overseer. There is no SEBI. There is no SEC. There are no rules around cryptocurrency, which is why a lot of people are a little apprehensive about it. But it is definitely not illegal. It is used for illegal activities. Now, that is, that is the biggest myth, that it is used only for illegal activity. Cryptocurrency is a form of money. And of course, money can be used for legal activities. It's like saying the internet is used for illegal activities. Of course, the internet has got porn. The internet can be used for drug trafficking. The internet can be used for hacking. So the same problems which apply to the internet apply to cryptocurrency. At the end of the day, it is money. What you can do with money, you can do with cryptocurrency. So by no means is it illegal. And what I try and do is that through the presentation, I will show you why a lot of us think it is the future of finance. Crypto can replace the Indian rupee. So all of us are very clear, that is at least the leading exchanges in India. I represent WazirX. We are very clear that we have no intention, our game, our aim, our objective, our mission, our vision is not to replace the Indian rupee, because it is fiat currency at the end of the day. What we are trying to do is that we don't believe that it's going to be another form of currency. What we believe that it is going to be an asset. It's going to be treated like an asset class. So the next thing is that people think it is very, very difficult to buy cryptocurrency. Actually, it is not. All you have to do is log on to WazirX, create your account, complete your KYC, and as simple that we have a feature called Quick Buy. It's by just a tap and a swipe, you can buy Bitcoin for as low as 100 rupees. Cryptocurrency is not taxed. Saudamini will cover this in detail. She's the domain expert on taxation and so on and so forth. And she's being a CA. She'll be able to talk your language. So I'll leave that to her to describe that to you. And another thing that most of us think of is that cryptocurrency means Bitcoin. No. Crypto means Bitcoin. No. Cryptocurrency is an umbrella category. There are many, there are right now, at the last count, when I last checked, there are about 6,000 different cryptocurrencies available in India. WazirX by itself has more than 200 different cryptocurrencies listed on its exchange. But there are, of course, as usual, there are a lot of scams that happen there. And there are a lot of blue-blooded companies, just like penny stocks, right? In the stock exchange. You have many dubious operators also operating in this space. But the easiest way to avoid all the mistakes is, of course, go, invest in the blue-blooded crypto companies, currencies. Another myth is that you hear the cost of Bitcoin has touched $55,000. It's touched $60,000. It's crashed to $30,000. Do I have to buy one Bitcoin? No, you don't. Bitcoin is infinitely divisible in terms, and it's called sats. It's just like 100 rupees or 1 rupee is divisible into 100 paisa. A Bitcoin is divisible into up to 8 digits, and it's called satoshis. So there is a lot of Bitcoin available. And everyone can get one. So another thing that everyone says is that Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme. It is just selling it to the next sucker. So the essence of a Ponzi scheme is that there is no value in a Ponzi scheme. Okay, there is no value that is created. You're just selling a dream. Like, it's like vapor. It's like vaporware. It solves no purpose. It solves no problems. But as I mentioned to you, Bitcoin solves at least 4 or 5 different theoretical computer science problems, which is why it is so valuable. But secondly, it is a store of value. Bitcoin was at $0 just 10 years ago. It is now worth on an average about $50,000, depending upon what the value of Bitcoin is today. It's beautiful as a store of value because it's compounding by 200% annually, year on year. Also, it is very easy to transfer. It's as easy as sending an email. So I can send money to you. I can send money to Pankaj. I can send Bitcoin to Sadamani by just attaching her email, her Bitcoin, her cryptocurrency address. And she'll get it into her Bitcoin wallet or whichever wallet that she's using. So I can transfer up to $10 worth of Bitcoin, or even $1 or even $10, $5 worth of Bitcoin anywhere on the planet to another person who has a Bitcoin address. So it's like sending an email. So I can send email to anyone who's got an email ID. So, but if my grandmother doesn't have an email ID, I cannot send it to her. So similarly, because she does not have an address or a wallet address, I cannot send Bitcoin to her. But all you need at the end of the day is an internet connection and a smartphone, and anywhere, anyone on this planet can get Bitcoin, which is why it becomes so beautiful. So the biggest use case of Bitcoin is actually, we've all heard about El Salvador, and they've become, they've legalized Bitcoin. It's become legal tender. But, and there is a lot of hoopla around it, but most experts are missing the biggest point of the problem that Bitcoin solves, or how it's going to transform El Salvador. So El Salvador was like India was, 5 years ago, actually. So 70% of El Salvador is unbanked. They don't have bank accounts. So look back to 2016, 2017, India's poor, which is about 60 to 70% of the population, did not have a bank account. So it took a resolute government to put all the Aadhaar stack into place. It's called the JAM stack, Jan Dhan loans, Aadhaar, and backed by Aadhaar or identified by Aadhaar, and along with the Mudra loans, which transferred money directly into the bank account to make it active. So unfortunately or fortunately, we don't have governments across the world who have this vision or the resolute will to bank and the capacity to bank large parts of a population. So what Bitcoin does is that small countries like El Salvador, and the works that don't have the money, you can do it for free, right? All you need is a phone and an internet connection, and this literally becomes your bank account and a store of value. So what have I just told you? I've told you that Bitcoin is peer-to-peer. We spent enough time on that. You can store value securely. So imagine you have to transfer $100 million worth of gold or $100 million worth of anything. How can you do it? It will take you anything between 3 to 7 days. If it's a cross-border transaction, you'll have to incur cost anything up to 10 to 15%. Bitcoin does it nearly for free. It's at fractions of a percentage. You can send money anywhere to anyone across the world. It's got a fixed and a transparent inflation schedule. Okay, so this is the it is actually the biggest point about Bitcoin. So in the video that I mentioned to you before, we've noticed that the governments are printing trillions of dollars. Okay, the first bailout happened, as I mentioned, in 2009, where the United States printed $700 billion of bailouts. COVID, okay, only last year, where the US has spent $5.2 trillion, okay, in printing flesh amounts of money. Now there is a new bill that that President Biden has introduced into the Congress with the infrastructure bill. That is another $2 trillion. So you look at the amount of money that is being pumped into the system. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell you that your value of the currency that you hold, the value of the money that you hold, of the fiat that you hold, is going to come down, or it's coming down, because the money supply on an average is increasing by about 20% year on year. So, so just look it up to understand the real impact of what this is going to do for people like you and me. You know, everything is going up. Inflation is going up. Why are the stock markets booming the way they are? Because there is a lot of cheap money, flushing around the system. But in Bitcoin, we know the amount of Bitcoins that are going to be released into the system. Every time a block is forged, only 7.5 new Bitcoin are released into the system. And there will only be 21 million Bitcoins ever printed, ever mined. And out of them, I think, 18.78 million Bitcoin have already been mined. Bitcoin, eventually the plan, because of the fixed inflation schedule, we know the amount of Bitcoin that will ever be mined and the total amount of Bitcoin. So we have another 30-40 years before, Bitcoin mining completely stops, and, the 21 million number that is reached. So the word that is usually used by Bitcoin maxis, so people who believe in Bitcoin are called Bitcoin maxis, is that it is called hard money. It's called ultra hard money because we know that there is a fixed amount. I cannot print infinite amount of Bitcoin. I know the inflation schedule of Bitcoin, and I know that the value, so that the rate of adoption of Bitcoin is also, you can plot it. It's very similar to the adoption of the internet. And I also know the total amount of Bitcoin. So largely you can predict the price of Bitcoin, and there will be variations, of course, market forces of demand and supply that come into play. So that is the beauty of what Bitcoin is trying to solve. And as I touched before, Bitcoin can be subdivided into 100 million Satoshis or sats. So they are infinitely divisible up to, infinite is nothing is infinite. It is divisible up to 8 digits. So there are 100 million Satoshis available. So this we've touched upon. I think, I won't spend too much time on it, how transactions work from A to B. I can send money. So why is Bitcoin so valuable? Because this transaction can be varied. Anyone can become a node. Okay, but to become a miner, you need a mining farm. But you and I, all we need is a simple basic computer to have the Bitcoin ledger downloaded into a machine. It's as simple as that. If you know torrents and you know uTorrent and so on and so forth, it's largely similar. Okay, the amount of computing power that is dedicated to secure the network is not funny, which is why you're hearing a lot of noise about Bitcoin is not green. It takes a lot of energy. But if you have the logical response to that argument is that look at the amount of energy that is consumed by traditional finance, by any network. It is infinitely small. Bitcoin just consumes 0.001% of the total energy consumption of the entire world. And what has it given you? It has given you the world's most secure network. You can transfer value literally for free, and it is transforming lives that are in a way that has never happened before. So that argument is largely redundant in my view. So it literally pays network. It literally pays people to protect its integrity and secure the network and act in good faith. So, which is all about mining. That is what miners do. So miners actually forge the next block, and they protect the network with its raw computational power. And how is the price determined? It's simply by demand and supply. So we know the amount of Bitcoins that are being mined. And every day there are more and more people that are coming into and accessing Bitcoin. And the biggest reason why Bitcoin prices may tend to go up is because institutions are getting into it in a big way. So you have countries that, small countries that came in, Brazil is the last country that I heard is that I remember. I think someone else also said that they're going to go make Bitcoin a legal tender. I forget which country. But now institutions are coming in a big way into Bitcoin. So they don't want to, their treasury operations are saying that I don't want to hold cash because the value of cash is falling. Real interest rates in America are at, interest rates in America are at 0.1%. So you're literally losing money when you hold cash. So can you hold it in Bitcoin? Which is why a lot of institutions are rushing into Bitcoin. It is cryptographically secure. It's a fancy way of saying that you use computer science to secure the network. It's censorship resistant. As I mentioned, no one can ban it, it will be there. And there is a scarcity part of it. So the biggest example is, of course, the value of chartered accountants. You have the the value. You know how many people pass out, and I think there are 2.5 lakh chartered accountants since the society was started. So the value of scarcity, the value of fixed inflation or the new amount of chartered accountants that will come in, which is why you're so valuable, right? And it cannot be interfered with any country or government. So be sure that China can ban Bitcoin operations, but Chinese can always store Bitcoin, and the China government can do nothing about it. Okay, they can peep into your mobile phone and snoop at you and all that. But if you're smart and Bitcoin people who hold Bitcoin are usually smart, you can use the unmarked computers to hold Bitcoin. So by the way, the rumor has it that the Chinese government is one of the largest holders of Bitcoin. This is unverified. So this is why there is so much excitement around Bitcoin. So it started off as an experiment. It started solving a lot of real world problems. As soon as people started hearing about it, more and more, people started coming into it. And as demand went up, prices went up. So on an average, every year, Bitcoin has been going up by 200% CAGR. Okay, no asset in the history of mankind has given you that sort of return. Why? Because it mimics gold. Okay, because the supply is fixed, the inflation schedule is fixed. We also know that only 2% of new gold comes into the market. The demand is ever growing. But in terms of gold, we by and large know the demand. In case of Bitcoin, the demand is only increasing as more and more people start adopting Bitcoin. So what Saudamini has built is she's built a couple of calculators here for our users, which can actually tell you, you can actually see, so this is the calculator. So I'll just leave it here, and you can actually go here and see if you had invested 10,000 rupees 5 years ago in Bitcoin, how much it would have been worth before, and so on and so forth. So you can use a calculator, figure out what are the past returns of Bitcoin, and hopefully you guys will advise. So this is the ROI calculator that again Saudamini is built, which tells you, you can actually say, okay, fine, how much return will I get on my crypto investments? I won't take you through that because you are familiar with calculators, but I just wanted to put it out there that we have these, mechanics available. But the interesting part is just look at gold. Gold, if you had bought 10,000, if you had spent 10,000 rupees, if you had invested, in terms of gold and in terms of S&P, Bitcoin has by and large outperformed everybody here. So as I mentioned, Bitcoin is just not the only cryptocurrency available. The next big cryptocurrency is Ethereum. And after that, there is another thing called Cardano, which builds on Ethereum, or which is supposed to be better than Ethereum. So like that, it's just like a program. You have the world's best minds applying their minds on it, and Bitcoin formed the basis of everything. And everyone is building, it's standing on the shoulders of giants and creating currencies that are bigger and better and solve different use cases. So we'll come to a couple of other currencies later in the presentation. But Dogecoin, if you see, it's at number 10. You've heard a lot about Dogecoin. So it's at number 10. Binance Coin is huge. Okay, Binance is incidentally the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange. It's at least 3 to 4 times bigger than Coinbase. Not many people know about Binance because they remain very low profile. And incidentally, WazirX is a Binance company. So I told you that Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency that solved a lot of problems, that started getting mass adoption, and is the world's leading cryptocurrency exchange or cryptocurrency. The next big cryptocurrency is called Ethereum. So what Bitcoin did was that it solved for specific problems. Okay, it solved for store of value because of its scarcity and because of its fixed inflation schedule. It solved for transfer of value. As I mentioned, you can transfer any amount of Bitcoin to any person in the world, literally free. But that's all that you could do with Bitcoin. So you had a bunch of people saying, okay, fine, this is a great idea, but what can I do? Can I do something else on top of that? Can I build a money platform on top of Bitcoin, right? Because if you've built digital money, you can do a lot more things, right, on top of that platform, which is why Ethereum was formed. So there was this young computer scientist, his name was Vitalik Buterin, look him up, at 17 years. So he started getting interested into Bitcoin in his teens, literally 13 or 14. And then he started trying to make Bitcoin better, but the Bitcoin it was built in such a way, and no one can tinker with it, right? You and I, or even Vitalik, who's one of the best computer scientists in the world, cannot change it. There are fixed rules for Bitcoin. It's immutable, as I mentioned, is one of them. So he set about building a new language, which is called Solidity, and he built a cryptocurrency on top of that language, on top of that computer program, which is called Ethereum. So Ethereum is literally programmable money. You can do a lot of stuff with Ethereum, which I'll come to in a bit. But it is just not about payments. It's just not about transfer of value. It's not about storage of value. It's all about smart contracts. And it's a marketplace for financial services. I'll tell you about I'll give you practical examples. You might not, theory is always good, but when you see practical examples, it makes more sense. So these are the use cases that Ethereum solves. So we all know PayPal. PayPal was invented in 1999 or 2000 by Elon Musk as a peer-to-peer transfer of money. So PayPal last year was at about $936 billion of money transfer. Now, Ethereum has been able to do 1.7 times the amount of payments that PayPal managed in just 4 years. Ethereum actually started in 2016. So what PayPal took 20 years to do, Ethereum did in just 4. And it did. Just look at the numbers in terms of headcount. Ethereum did it in 0.2% of the headcount. So this is the phenomenal thing that Ethereum has done. So when you hear about the biggest use case for cryptocurrencies is money transfer, it's payments, it's remittance. But this is Ethereum is more about transactions, and the numbers just stack up. So 1.7 times the amount of transactions or the payments that PayPal did in 1/4 the time, and with 0.2% of the headcount. So that's what Ethereum did. I touched upon Coinbase. So Coinbase is a centralized exchange, largely like WazirX, or like if you look at the stock market, you can say Zerodha or the Bombay Stock Exchange or any other. Actually, not Zerodha, the Bombay Stock Exchange. Zerodha is a broker. So what a stock exchange is that it is a central marketplace where buyers and sellers come, and price discovery happens for an asset, correct? So what Ethereum does is that it takes away the need for a centralized entity to facilitate the transaction. So if you haven't missed, the central theme of cryptocurrency is that there is no need for a central authority. There is no need for a central bank to issue a currency. There is no need for a centralized exchange for transactions to happen. So there is this entity called Uniswap that exists on the Ethereum platform, which allows you to swap assets, cryptocurrencies, exactly like Coinbase does. But again, Uniswap processed 30% of the volumes of what Coinbase did. This is last year's numbers, with 1/3, not less than 1/3 of the headcount of Coinbase, and with 2.5% of the funding that Coinbase got. So what decentralized finance does, or it's called DeFi, or what these platforms do is that they mimic real world platforms at a fraction of the costs that that happens in the real world, at a fraction of the headcount. Because what it does is that it does away with a lot of unnecessary paperwork. It does away with unnecessary organization, permissions, and so on and so forth. And it does it through smart contracts. Just look up smart contracts, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So e-lending, the Lending Club was the original unicorn in the US, started 15 years ago. It was a fintech unicorn. Okay, it's still losing money. Okay, now there is this lending platform again on Ethereum. It's called MakerDAO, where you can get loans. Okay, and this happens again through smart contracts. There is no intermediary. I want a loan from Sodamini. I enter into a smart contract with Sodamini directly. I don't know who Sodamini is. It's completely pseudo anonymous. I want $1,000 from Sodamini. Sodamini agrees to lend me $1,000. I put up collateral, which is kept by MakerDAO. What happens is that which is not kept by MakerDAO, but the smart contract has it. Sodamini doesn't. If Sodamini doesn't repay the money to me, the collateral is liquidated, and the money is given back to the lender. Sodamini returns the money, the collateral is returned, and everyone lives happily ever after. So these are just a flavor of the use cases that DeFi does. So what DeFi does is that it's software written on blockchains. So it is computer programs, blockchains that are smart blockchains, smart contracts that power the blockchain, that allow users to interact with each other. Again, peer-to-peer, there is no intermediary. The software is intermediary, and the software facilitates the transaction. So the problem that DeFi tries to solve is that centralized finance is biased. Okay, if you are of a particular surname, if you are from a particular community, or you don't have paperwork, so you don't have a good credit rating, you don't have a credit history, you don't get a loan, right? The DeFi takes care of all of that. It's extremely complex. Paperwork is extensive because the risks, compliance is there, risks are there, all that is there in place. What smart contracts do is that everything becomes a smart contract. All the costs, all the overheads are built into the smart contracts. DeFi, on the other hand, is transparent because anyone can do it. It's fair, it's inclusive, it's less complicated, it's faster, and it's of course cheaper. So last thing that I want to touch upon is something called NFTs. I don't know if you've heard about it. So this is the latest rage that is rocking the crypto world. So what it does is that at the end of the day, cryptocurrency is a token, right? It's a coin or a token. And it's a fungible token. One Bitcoin is equal to one. I think someone has to mute themselves. Yeah. So one token is equal to another. One Bitcoin is equal to any other Bitcoin. One Ether is equal to any other Ether. One Doge is equal to any other Doge. What non-fungible tokens do is that each token is unique. So if you are parents and if you have siblings or younger siblings, they had those playing cards, like the Pokemon playing cards, where every card is unique. The WWF cards, every card is unique. So what it does is that these tokens can store extra information right from who created it, the entire history. It's called meta information, and these tokens can be exchanged with each other. So what it does is that it empowers a lot of people, a lot of artists. So what NFT is doing is that it's empowering a lot of artists, a lot of singers, a lot of dancers, a lot of painters, a lot of doodlers. And what you can do is that create something unique. And of course, it can be reproduced, but the pride of the use case of an NFT is that if I like an R.K. Lakshman cartoon, there are thousands of R.K. Lakshman cartoons, right? But what I can do is that if R.K. Lakshman decided to create an NFT and I want to actually prove that I own this particular cartoon of R.K. Lakshman, the common man, I can, R.K. Lakshman or Times of India, whoever owns the copyright has to do is mint an NFT and I can buy it. Correct. So what it does is that it gives me proof of ownership of that particular NFT. So there might be thousands of copies of that cartoon all over the place. But what it does is that it gives me ownership. I can prove that this particular cartoon belongs to me and I have paid for it. Now, if I want, I can sell it to someone else at a lower or a higher rate, and the ownership gets transferred. And the beauty about this is that you have, through smart contracts, you can build it in such a way that the creator of that artist can get a percentage of the royalty every time the art gets sold to another person. So that's the biggest use case that is happening. So imagine how NFTs can transform the lives of Indian artisans. So we are big on crypto because we believe that it can truly transform India. All of us know that large parts of India are just, we're just scratching the surface in terms of getting in terms of financial inclusion for a lot of Indians. The government is doing a stellar job, but this is where the private sector can come in, and people don't do it we can do it out of a sense of goodness and a sense of wanting to help others. But it can also be done because I literally want to, it makes smart business sense, right? If I can lend 100 rupees to some farmer in Hubli or Hebar to buy seeds, and then all he has to do is give me 1%, at a rate of maybe 1 or 2%, when he pays, the rapacious money lender in his village close to, 2 to 3% a month. I can say, okay, fine, buy your seeds. This can happen through a smart contract. Buy your seeds, just pay me 1% a year. So, this is how the entire peer-to-peer lending, peer-to-peer financing, the entire revolution can work through smart contracts, through cryptocurrency. I'm just giving you flavors of what is possible, so that we are wedded in practicality and in examples. So similarly, when you go to, for example, when you go to Rajasthan and when you stay in one of those fancy hotels, you have that typical ethnic or the folk singers and dancers coming and doing it, and then you feel sad, and then you give them some tips. But imagine, and they are usually stellar artists, the way they sing, the way they dance, the way they emote. Imagine if you could create an NFT for them. The world is the market. They can, all they can do is monetize their talent and the sheer talent that they have, and monetize it and make a good living out of it. So this is a sticky topic, and I'll try and make it as general as possible. So the history of cryptocurrency is checkered in India. It has been around, so cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, for example, started in 2009-10. There are a lot of early adapters of Bitcoin also in India. But what happened was that in 2018, the RBI passed a circular banning Bitcoin. I'm sure you guys are aware of it and you know more about it than I do. But what happened was that a lot of companies went to the Supreme Court, and fought the ban and got the ban overturned. Now, the caveat to that is, of course, the ban has been overturned. So it's an unregulated sector, as I told you before. There are no rules. What companies such as WazirX have been doing is that we are saying they're self-regulated. So there are extensive KYC checks in place. We take your PAN, we take your Aadhaar, we do a video KYC. We have extensive anti-money laundering measures in place. We have partners that can transact, that watch 130,000 digital assets or cryptocurrencies across the world, across 20 different blockchains. So we look for suspicious transactions in wallets. So all that we are doing, but at the end of the day, because this is an unknown, it's not attracting the amount of investment that it usually can get. So my CEO, for example, Nishya Shetty, has started a movement called India Wants Crypto. For 1,000 days, it's been 3 years now, he's been going and telling, tweeting every day at the lawmakers saying that please get us regulation, please make this grayness go away, because only then can the revolution truly happen and empower millions of Indians. The latest we've heard is that, of course, the RBI has gone on record saying that they're going to launch the central bank digital currency, which is the e-rupee. I think a version of that has already been launched, where you can avail of subsidies, on your mobile phone. All you need through an SMS. So no doubt that this is the future, and the recent statements of Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman have also been encouraging. She said something to the tune of, we cannot ban it, but we want to look at it very, very carefully, and we don't want to lose out on the innovation in this space. So that's what she said. I'm just paraphrasing it, but we strongly believe that a ban is not going to happen. Regulation will happen, and it could happen as early as in next year. That's the signals that we are getting. What we think is that it will be treated like another asset class. There will be regulations in place, and it could be a little strict, but that's okay. It goes with the territory. So Damini, why don't you take over from here?
Sure, Raj. Thanks, Raj. Before I start, I would like to tell you this is more of an interpretation about the different elements that are quoted in our Income Tax Act and GST law. There is no defined law as such for how crypto needs to be taxed. To be honest, there is no terminology called crypto or cryptocurrency in our acts. So I have divided this into two phases. One is our Income Tax Act and the GST law. So we have our multiple heads of income there. So if we see the first head of income, that is capital gains. Now, when do we charge tax under capital gains? When we consider something as an investment. So based on the duration of that investment, it's going to be a short-term capital gain or a long-term capital gain. So if it is short-term, it gets taxed with the slab rates, and long-term goes at 20%. Now, what is that the law says about capital asset? It clearly says that section 2, subsection 14 of the act says that property of any kind held by an SSC, whether or not connected with his business or profession. So just a simple reading of this particular section states that we can consider a crypto as a capital asset when it is held for investment purposes. In that case, when there is sale, we can obviously calculate the gain on it, and then the taxation can be taken into consideration. However, now this is when you are buying and selling. But what happens if you are a miner? As Raj has already mentioned, miners are the ones who find it. So when that particular crypto gets sold, how are you going to charge tax on it? So here there are multiple things. We need the cost of acquisition. We need the cost of improvement. Now, when it's mining, the cost of acquisition cannot be accurately calculated, because what is the cost involved there? Is it the hardware, the electricity, or the brain power? How can you calculate it? It's a qualitative factor. So I would rely on the rationale behind the Honorable Supreme Court's decision for B.C. Srinivas Shetty's case, where it said that when cost of acquisition cannot be accurately calculated, it cannot be charged to capital gain tax. So then probably we can take the next head of income, which could be a probable place where it could be taxed, is the income from business and profession. Now, the logic with business and profession is anything that is there in your inventory, you're buying and selling it, charge the tax on it on the profits what you are making at. Now, we would charge the income from the business and profession if the crypto is being listed as an inventory in your balance sheet. So when it is there, treat the crypto as your inventory, calculate the profit on it, matter ends there. See, the bottom line is, since crypto is an unregulated, I would stress on unregulated, it is not illegal, it's unregulated. It's better to pay tax at the highest rate, because we are doing our duty towards the country, and the tax laws are justified there. It's not that we are evading taxes, and that's something what we can advise our clients as well. And as we know, the last thing is the income from other sources. Now, if you do not want to consider it as an capital asset, you do not want to consider it as a business income, then what is it? We have a residual head, which is the other sources. So we can have that, and probably, since it's considered as an other sources, because the act says that if anything which doesn't fall under the head which are above the 4 other heads, then it's coming under income from other sources. Then we have a provision, certain expenses can be deducted as well. So probably that approach can be applied here. And there are instances where crypto is received as gift. Then we can obviously take the rules which are applicable for gift, like above 50,000, and it has to be disclosed, or if it is received from relatives, we will not have to pay tax on it. So if you're treating it like every other gift that is received, then we can even consider the exemptions available there. But again, I would suggest that because crypto is an unregulated market, it is advisable to pay tax on it. So that was more about how we are looking at it from the income tax perspective. Now, if we look at it from the GST law, now to consider for GST law, there are two factors which I consider it very important. One thing is whether it's in supply. Second thing is whether it's a supply of goods or whether it's a supply of services. Now, the definition of supply is very inclusive in section 7, which says it should be a supply that is sale, transfer, license, exchange, rental, release, etc. It should be a consideration by a person in the course of furtherance of business. And there should be an agreement. So somewhere this, the trading of crypto does fall into the definition of supply. But now, is it a good or is it a services? So goods is every kind of mobile property other than money and security. So it's ruled out that crypto can be put there. Okay, but services says anything other than goods, including money and securities. Now, yes, we have still not come to a decision whether crypto is a digital asset or is it a currency. But at the end of the day, it is not, we can still relate it to kind of money, because you're investing in money, it's in digital form. So I would suggest that I would interpret this as that it is a kind of supply of services. And again, there tax it at the higher rate, that would be residual tax at 18%. Now, what happens? The immediate question comes is, what about import tax credit? Because that's something what is looked forward to. Now, the question of input tax credit is always going to be doubtful, because we need to understand what are the criteria involved to claim that input tax credit. Is it in the business, a person who is selling and buying, is that person in the business of selling and buying crypto? So as of now, till there is a definite law or a rule. So there was recently I read somewhere that at least this the center for the indirect taxes, they are discussing of at least bringing crypto under the law. So it is defined whether you can claim or you cannot claim the import tax credit, what should be the taxable rate of GST on it. So these things we are looking forward for some clarity, probably soon, probably in one of the GST council meets or something, we can hope for some kind of clarity. So this is my interpretation of the different elements in the Income Tax Act and the GST law. Based on reading and discussing and understanding what our audit subject talks in particular about, what are the things we as auditors need to keep in mind while our clients are involved in a crypto transaction. Again, they are not doing anything illegal. They're just that they're involved in a transaction which is not, there is no clarity on it. So what are the checklists we could have? That's something I mentioned in the next slide. Raj. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So again, this is not an complete list. Our folks are more experienced, they could have better points. But to start with, I suggest that these are the things that are checked when it is on a large scale. There are crypto transactions that are involved. So the first thing that could be involved, could be checked, is the control book. Now, basically, these are the details you can get probably from the exchange. So exchange, for example, is WazirX. So your client has got an account with WazirX. So that becomes an exchange, and the exchanges maintain control books. Now, it's something we need to know that only when there is a legal binding, that's when the exchange would hand over the data and everything. So, but yes, you have this possibility of checking the control book. Now, the control book is as good as a ledger. Okay, there is a transaction, buy and sell, wo wahan record ho raha hai. So the details of the purchase and the seller are maintained in this. So what is the address? Address, when I say here, it is a digital address of the seller and the buyer. Those details are there in the control book. Now, the ledger of transactions. This ledger of transactions, yes, it's a part of the control book as well. But our ledgers have got a narration as well. So those kind of narrations can be expected in the, it depends about what kind of bookkeeping is the exchange following, but probably if it's there, you can check those kind of narrations. Now the hash, so basically I said it's a digital address, which is in a form of hash. So now there are websites like Chainalysis, and Bitcoin has their own platform where you can check the validity of Bitcoin. Ethereum has their own platform where you can check their validity. So you can use this hash function, which is a digital address, to verify whether that is valid, whether it is tampered, or whether the ownership is right as mentioned in the records of your client.
So Sadamini, I'd just like to add here. So one
Yes.
of the biggest myths around cryptocurrency and is that it is anonymous. No, it is not anonymous. It is pseudo anonymous. It's like your mobile number. You might not know the name behind the mobile number, but your private address and your public address is known. Your public address is like your email ID. So I have so if anyone has to send me crypto, they'll send it to me to my public address, which is my email ID. The private keys are the password that I can access my crypto. Now, when people say that cryptocurrencies are anonymous, no one knows where it is, as I mentioned to you before, it is a transparent blockchain. So if you were lucky enough to buy or transact in crypto way back in say 2010, that is there on the ledger forever. So any enforcement directorate or any financial entity that wants to know what you've been up to, it is very trivial for them to do. This is strictly all off the record, but anyone can find out anything what you've been up to, because once you come onto the online space, you leave your digital footprints behind. Okay, so why are everybody getting all het up about Facebook and privacy and all that? That extends to crypto. Your digital fingerprints are, the moment you come online, your digital fingerprints are there all over the place. So any person who thinks that you buy crypto and you're anonymous, let me assure you, you are not. Anyone who's ever bought crypto, if the government or any government agency decides to know who you are, it's trivial for them to find out. And secondly, the other thing that people think is that, it can be used for transactions and all that, you can transfer it from one address to the other. Yes, you can, but again, that is public domain. So if you look at all the scams that have happened in the crypto space, recently there was a big scam that happened in a major DeFi protocol, where one scamster took away nearly $700 million, but the poor fellow couldn't run away with the money because everybody was watching his address, his public address, with a hawk eye. So it's like transferring it from one address to the other in full public glare. The spotlight is on you. It's simply not possible for you to remain anonymous in the crypto space. It's pseudo anonymous. And for anyone to crack that identity, for any government agent or any agency to crack that identity, is very, very trivial. Yeah, so Damni, sorry I interrupted you.
No problem, Raj, but that's a valid point. So we need to understand that we can be traced. And you can also trace your clients. You can do the back calculation, and the tracing is possible. And there are laws which are, though not directly for crypto holders and crypto users, but we do have the Indian Penal Code, the consumer forums, which are supporting people who are who have grievances against probably a mishap or anything like that. So those provisions are also there in our Indian legal system. And a Companies Act mandates every company to have, which is into an IT specific company. So our exchanges are basically an IT specific company. So they should be having the disaster recovery plan in place, and we should have their physical security, logical security, equipment should be well audited. We should have an IT audit process in place. So that's something also you can verify whether your client is with a trusted exchange, or whether the exchange is something which is reliable. So that's something you can keep in mind. And recently there was something in news where MCA has said that every transaction, every crypto transaction needs to be disclosed in the financial year. And obviously the audited statements of the company and other compliance details can be verified by you before you decide that what your clients could do next. So there is this is a summary or a basic checklist what I have created. But there is one thing I need to tell, which I missed when I was talking about GST, is there are possibilities that the trading with crypto assets on a digital platform could be treated as an OIDAR services. There could be equalization levy as well as applicable. But then yes, all of this comes if you're more than 20 lakhs and registered for GST, or your client is registered for GST. So this is also one thing we need to keep in mind, that probably equalization levy will be applicable. Probably the service provider could be an OIDAR, or there could be reverse tax mechanism applicable. So I'm just throwing the different kinds of possibilities here. More of interpretation of the act could probably help us approach this better. But yes, bottom line is, please make sure that the tax is paid for all the crypto transactions, probably at the highest rate, that will be the greatest, so that we are not doing anything illegal when the market is not illegal. It's just an unregulated and we're waiting for some regulation. So that's it from me.
Okay, so yeah, I'll just see if anything else, Sudhamni. Yeah, so these are, yeah, so these are the reference papers or the jump points for all of you to look at. This is the original Bitcoin white paper, which is called bitcoin.org.bitcoin PDF. Just read it up. By Satoshi Nakamoto. Nobody knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is, who's the founder of Bitcoin. He, she, they, a bunch of mysterious people or persons or people who actually developed it, made the guidelines for it and suddenly disappeared into thin air. Very rare in this age of in this age in time, where even if you have a cake, you put it on social media. This guy has created a financial revolution and just disappeared from the face of the earth. Of course, there are enough and more YouTube channels. So it depends upon the complexity of the topic that you wanted to get into. So for example, if you want to understand from a technical point of view how things work, you can look at Finematics, which explains to graphics all the major cryptocurrencies. So every major cryptocurrency, whether it is a Bitcoin or Ethereum, has a white paper, and the money supply is determined by something that is called tokenomics, which tells you the inflation rate, which tells you the deflation rate, the total money supply, and how the token can be used. So there are enough and more resources available. Google is your friend. Please make sure that you get on board, because I don't think you want to miss out on an asset that has on an average given you 200% CAGR for the last 10 years. Cool, I'm done. I'm open to questions. Pankaj?
Yes, sir.
Either my lecture was so boring or it is
Yes,
so
no.
put everyone to sleep.
I guess most of the doubts are very clear. It's a totally a different world which is available for growth. People are into equity shares over here. So I guess maybe they will start investing in cryptocurrency and make money, I guess.
Yeah, so Pankaj, it's a very interesting point that you're raising. So between the major exchanges, there are about 3 to 4 major exchanges and 3 to 4 minor exchanges. Between us, people have multiple accounts. We estimate that there are about 15 million or 1.5 crore people who are into cryptocurrency. Okay, WazirX does last month does transactions worth $5 billion. Okay, WazirX itself. So you can imagine the number of people that are interested into crypto. And what we are seeing is that, we expect numbers to come in from Mumbai, Gujarat, and, the richer belts, right? But what you're seeing is that crypto adoption is coming from 55% of my new users are coming from tier 2 and tier 3 towns. So places like Ranchi, Jamshedpur, Trichy, Tiruvannamalai, Sonepat. And what is very crazy is that women are jumping into crypto like nobody's business. So this is a perfect storm waiting to happen. And I would urge all of you all to just, read up about it, because the topic by itself is fascinating.
Yes, right, sir. Any questions anyone wants to ask? Any doubts? Anything?
Pankaj, I have a question.
Yes.
I just want to ask, any specific investment is required, particular investment amount for purchasing these Bitcoins? Any minimum amount is required for buying this?
No, not at all, Shikha, right? No, nothing, no minimum investment is required. Bitcoin, even if it is worth $55,000 or $50,000, one single Bitcoin, it can be broken up individually. It can be broken up, as I mentioned in my, presentation, and you can buy Bitcoin worth 100 rupees. It's as simple as that. Every exchange does it.
Okay. And any specific services or any specific transaction which is prohibited for this?
No. So there is not. So again, this is not investment advice, and please do your own research. When you're starting off into Bitcoin, as a friend, I would tell you, into crypto, I would tell you that don't go beyond the top 5 cryptocurrencies. Incidentally, there is a token or a company called Polygon. The company's name is Polygon, and the token's name is Matic. That in just 1 year, it has become $1 billion company. So it powers Ethereum, which is a layer 2 solution. It's slightly technical. I will not get into it, but India is the next wave of India. So incidentally, according to chain analysis, which Sudhamini mentioned, crypto adoption is the highest rate in India. We are the fastest, we are the more amount of people are buying crypto. The largest amount of people that are buying crypto are from India.
And just to add here, Shikha, see, what you asked was that, is there something we do not have to do? But there is something what you have to do. So whenever you start your transactions with the crypto exchange, your KYC needs to be verified. You need to have a valid bank account. So that's a very important factor before you start any of your investments. And please, this is something for everyone that, yes, we are from WazirX, but do your own research. And there is one thing you need to remember. Please see the validity of the coin. There are a lot of fudge coins which are in the market. Make sure you don't get carried away with what is just in news. Do your own research. And WazirX does provide a lot of reading material for you to do your research.
Right. Thanks a lot, ma'am.
And Deepak, I have one question.
Yes, yes.
Will you know from your chain analysis, will you know that you are buying crypto from a crook? Because there will be, slush money or something like that, which is stored in cryptos. And if you buy it, we can get into trouble, can't we?
No, so the currency note that you have, typically you don't know where it is coming from also, right? This is money. Money has no color. So to answer your question directly, the chain analysis provides the address from where the transaction has come from. So if I buy from, for example, I buy from you, the chain analysis will say that it will be an alphanumeric address and it will come from you. Okay, and it will say that this is the sender's address and this is the receiver's address. So that's all the information that I get. And financial agencies and enforcement agencies across the world, assuming that you're a crook, will know your email ID, your public address, because the amount of, so we usually think of Indian enforcement agencies as very tech unsavvy. Let me assure you, it is not. We get close to about 3 to 4 requests a day from cyber cells from across the country, and the requests are very, very specific. They point out to the transaction. They say that this is the address that it has gone through, and this transaction happened in your exchange, and please let us know the details. And more often than not, if it comes from an enforcement agency, we take all these matters very, very seriously.
So what you're saying is, if you buy it from WazirX, it can be clean money. It is going to be clean money. Yeah? So
it's money at the end of the day. Money has no color, right? So in WazirX, it's a buyer. So there can be crooks on WazirX. I'm playing devil's advocate, but no crook will come and do KYC, give my Aadhaar number, give his Aadhaar number, give his PAN details, give his bank account details. Correct?
Yeah. Okay. So ever since WazirX has been in existence, we have got clean money through WazirX. That is the
you buy through WazirX. You buy through WazirX. Everybody knows the buyer and seller.
All right.
Buy through any exchange. The buyer and seller are known.
Okay. Is WazirX an exchange or a broker?
It's an exchange.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Can I ask a question to?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, please.
Good morning. Now, this cryptocurrency, it seems there are a lot of inconsistencies which are inherent in this product. Now, first of all, we say that this is digital money, or whether it is a digital product. Then we talk of, levying an income tax on this. Third, we talk of GST on this. And throughout the session, like this being a digital, no one knows each other. But still, we say that we know people who can originate and everything. Now, that's why I say that there are a lot of inconsistencies in this product. And when you want to invest, so you can invest through shelling out your money, the RBI currency, correct?
Correct.
So that means again, it is the money which buys a cryptocurrency.
Correct.
So, if no one knows each other, neither the exchange knows who is the buyer, who is the seller. And throughout the world, even the government doesn't know what is happening. But still, this has become a crazy product.
So, sir, I'd like to say a couple of things. As I mentioned before, if you're buying on WazirX, the buyer and seller are known. It's just like buying on Zerodha. You might not know that I bought it through Dilip or I bought it through, through Pankaj. But the buyer and seller are known to the exchange, or in case of Zerodha, in the name of the broker. But if you go back to the origin of money, your money that you have, even fiat money, or even so I'm going off the topic here, but money is just is printed. RBI decides how much money it is, and it is digital money. Only a fraction of it is now physical money. So everything is digital, and cryptocurrency. So the future of the world is digital. So we are not looking at cryptocurrency as a mode of exchange, which is what you're alluding to. In India and specifically WazirX, we are saying that this is an asset class. Please treat it like an asset class. Is as simple as that. The buyers and sellers are known because you have to do extensive KYC checks on WazirX and all major exchanges. And if you buy, so there, WazirX is just one of the ways where you can buy cryptocurrency. You can go and buy cryptocurrency from anywhere. That's the beauty of cryptocurrency. Now, if you go and buy it out there from a random, there are other ways which I will not explain for lack of time. That is where you could get into trouble because you don't know where the money is coming from. You don't know who the other person is and so on and so forth. But when most of the transactions in India happen through exchanges where the buyers and sellers are known, KYC is done. It's all self-regulated and we cooperate extensively with enforcement agencies. Because, and all said and done, all our CEOs, especially my CEO, is asking for regulation.
So, that's meaning what I'm trying to say is that sometimes we say that this is unregulated, but sometimes we say it is the exchanges knows that, so that means there is a regulation.
No, there is sir, there is no regulation. We are self-regulated. The government has not told us anything to do, but what exchanges do as best practices is that we follow KYC, very strict, stringent KYC norms. Now there could be fly-by-night agencies that don't follow KYC norms. Okay. Now they could be, hypothetically speaking, but what I'm telling you is that no one has told WazirX that you have to follow KYC because there's no regulation, right? Like there is no SEBI telling us what to do and what not to do. But because we are India's #1 exchange, we've been around for a long time, we follow best practices, and world over all exchanges do that. The best of the breed do that. So we've taken it upon ourselves to do KYC, we do it, and we cooperate extensively with enforcement agencies.
But is it, can you call this as a hedge against inflation?
So it depends upon the lens that you're looking at, sir. So there are people who say that, it is a replacement to fiat currency, but we are practical people. We know that no sovereign government will ever give up its right to print fiat of its currency. There are some people who say that it is a token. There are some people who say it's the lens. It is everything that you want it to be. But for all practical purposes, we look at it as an asset class. and we look at it as an instrument that can give you a tremendous amount of return, because the supply is known, that the supply is fixed, the inflation rate is known, and the demand is only keeping on increasing, which is why the price is going up, which I mentioned to and I alluded to. So even if you are wary of cryptocurrencies, what we tell people and all new people who are coming into the space is that invest money that you can afford to lose. So, you know, we spend 5,000 rupees on a night out on a weekend, put that money into cryptocurrency. Even if you lose it, if you invest it in blue chip cryptocurrency or like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Matic, the Indian token that I spoke to you about, very less chances of you losing money, because Bitcoin has never fallen year on year. It has only grown by 200%.
Now, what you try to say is that there are these few cryptocurrencies which are existing. So
Correct, sir.
maybe 5, 10, 15, 20.
No, sir, there are
Now-
many more. There are many more.
हाँ,
But in WazirX, we have 200 plus.
चलो 200 प्लस हो गया. तो
हाँ जी.
अभी कल उठ के ये फेसबुक वाला बोलेगा कि he will start the cryptocurrency of his own.
हाँ जी.
तो क्या करने का? We should start buying from Facebook.
नहीं सर, आप सीए हो ना, आप थोड़ा देखोगे ना, आप पढ़ोगे इसका प्लान क्या है, ये क्या करने वाला है, what is the use case that it's trying to solve. Every cryptocurrency exists for a reason. There is, and all the good ones usually have a problem that is trying to solve. Like there are certain cryptocurrencies, I told you, I already spoke to you about Bitcoin and Ethereum. Like Matic is trying to solve, so the transaction rate, okay, so I'll get a little specific and technical here. Every time you do a transaction on Ethereum, you have to pay transaction fees, which is called gas. Because the demand for Ethereum is so high, the gas fees are going up. So Matic is an Indian company that has devised a solution to solve for that problem. So you can use Matic as a token, as gas. I'm making it very, very simple. It offers a solution. So that is a very good use case. That has got tremendous scope, because as Ethereum grows, the need for Matic will grow. So you look at the white paper that the Matic founders have told. They tell you that this is what the problem that we are trying to solve. There is tokenomics, as in they tell you that this is the amount of tokens that are available, and this is the usage of the token. And then you read the project, and then you decide whether you want to go in for it or not. Usually there are a lot of resources that are available on YouTube and in Google and in the founders' white papers that tell you what is the problem that the cryptocurrency is trying to solve. That is not to say what you're alluding to is that there are a lot of fly-by-night operators that make cryptocurrencies that can do it actually. But I am sure that, you know, we are sensible people. You know, the lure for easy money is very high, right, sir? So it's best to stick to the top 10 cryptocurrencies. That is what we advise, you know, newcomers to do.
So where does the money go? Meaning once the founders print their own cryptocurrency, so from who are the first?
So yes, sir. So just like, yeah. So again, getting a little technical, please read about it, because this is just superfluous information that I'm giving you in the interest of time. There is something called an ICO. Just like you have an IPO, you have an initial coin offering. So where they do is that this usually happens in the US, which is the hub for cryptocurrency. They announce that this is the project and this is the problem that they're trying to solve. And then they say that these are the amount of coins that I'm releasing into the market. You can buy it using fiat currency or cryptocurrency. So if I want to start a new token solving for, say, for example, global warming, I can start a cryptocurrency, but I have to solve for that problem. I can release it, and I do it through an ICO. And people can subscribe to that ICO or buy it through an ICO using fiat currency and cryptocurrency. I can buy for it, and that's how it comes into the market. And then exchanges list it, and then buyers and sellers take over. That in a nutshell is a very, very simplistic explanation of how coins get listed, sir.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
No problem, sir.
Thank you, sir. It was a good point told by Rajgopalan sir. वैसे भी नवरात्रि चालू है, बाहर का ज्यादा नहीं खाना है, घर पे दाल चावल ही खाना है. तो जो आज का डिनर का पैसा बच जाएगा वो हम लोग इन्वेस्ट कर सकते हैं थोड़ा. उसको अश्योरेंस देने के लिए कि कितना ग्रो होता है, चलो देखने के लिए आज. Small amount if anyone wants to try, right, sir?
Absolutely. So what I would urge all of you all to do is that because you are, you are you are in the finance field, you will get a lot of queries about this. I'm sure every day someone is telling you, you can't ignore it, right? So what you should ideally do is just put some money into Bitcoin and keep, because what will happen is that you've at least dipped your finger, your toes into the into this world. And let me tell you, it's completely different. So then you start reading about it a lot more. You'll start understanding it a lot more. You'll read newspaper, articles about it a lot more. So आपका knowledge automatically बढ़ जाएगा इसके बारे में. So it need not be that you want to invest in it, but the moment you put some money in it, you are, you become more interested in it. So that is the best way to. Otherwise, it will become just another experiment that is happening. एक और headline बन जाएगा, and आप इसके बारे में ज़्यादा सीखोगे नहीं.
Right, sir. So, anyone has any other query? Please come forward and ask. Oh, I guess there are.
Hello, I have one question.
Yes, sir, please, sir. Thank you.
Is WazirX approved by the Ministry of Finance, or is it just a private company carrying on exchange functions?
Anji, this is a private company. As I mentioned, this is unregulated. So there is no regulation. There is no overseeing authority. There is no SEBI that oversees the crypto space, like how SEBI overlooks banks and so on and so. RBI overlooks banks. I'm sorry. There is no and SEBI overlooks different aspects. There is no overseeing authority here. So it's the wild west here. But we are self-regulated. We follow the best practices that are happening across the globe in this space, including in India. What other companies, for example, banks are doing, they're trying to replicate that in our space to the best extent possible. So there is no overseeing authority. It is a gray area. It is unregulated.
But how is it that even SEBI does not regulate you? Because they are supposed to regulate all kind of exchanges, no?
They regulate fiat currency exchanges, sir. This is a
Even
new
commodity exchanges are regulated by
Anji, yes, but that is the entire thing. Cryptocurrency has not been listed as a commodity. It's not been listed as an asset class.
But you call yourself an asset class because you say that you are selling an asset.
We are pushing for that, sir. See, the thing is that there are no rules. So as Sodamini told you, what we are doing is that we are saying that this is what, in our mind, this is what you should do. So what we are hoping for is that in this next budget that is happening in February, things will become a lot more clearer, because those are the indications that we are getting from, again, this is off the record from Delhi, that there will be some form of regulation that will happen.
Are you pushing for that kind of regulation?
Absolutely,
because,
sir.
Because
No,
if
absolutely.
like competition, huge amounts of competition, no?
No, absolutely, sir. But what happens is that because of the lack of regulation, it is not, the sector is not growing as fast as it can, because risk covers professionals such as yourself, because your duty is to preserve the client's capital and protect the client from risk. They won't jump into it wholeheartedly because of the lack of regulation. Nobody knows what is going to happen here, right? So what regulation does is that it gives it predictability. It removes all the grayness, and everything is in black and white. So
See,
that is
what are you? Are you an NBFC then? WazirX, is it?
We are
an
a private
NBFC?
listed. We are a private company, so we are not an NBFC. So NBFC again has got is got a separate set of rules. We are a private company, private limited company.
So I don't want to be derogatory, but then this is something like Sahara and those Peerless and other fellows, no, who had a merry time for a long time.
Bilkul, sir. You could look at it that way, but we do unlike them. We are not a chit fund, so you could say that's you could use the example of chit funds also.
Yeah.
But this is we call it it's a digital asset class, and we, as I mentioned before, we do extensive checks on KYC. We have extensive risk management systems in place. We work with law enforcement. We have to the extent possible, we have AML capabilities. We trace a lot of the fraudulent transactions happening. And in the near future, you'll see a lot of companies getting listed also. So you have 3 or 4 companies that are already calling themselves unicorns. That is because they are other investors, and VCs are looking at it as these guys are following the rules and doing the best to the extent possible.
BCs, you said?
VCs, venture capitalists. Sir.
Venture
So,
capitalists. Okay.
yeah,
sir.
so there are other companies that have been, if you look at the news, smaller companies than us are calling themselves unicorns. So you can call, what do we call ourselves is $1 million question.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So any more questions?
I have one question. Suppose if we want to open an account with you, so we have to go to your site and open the account.
Anji, so it's very simple. You open your account, we'll ask you for your first name, last name, email ID. And then we ask you for your PAN or your PAN and Aadhaar. If you don't want to give your Aadhaar, because there are certain people who are very, they say Aadhaar is not necessary. We ask you for your license, something that can prove your address. And of course, there is a KYC that happens. Then you're active, then your account becomes active. It's as simple as that. It usually takes about 15 minutes to open an account in WazirX, provided all your documentation is intact, because we verify your KYC. So if your photograph doesn't match your PAN or your Aadhaar, it could get rejected.
Suppose if we have our account in some other like Upstock or anything, that cannot be connected with this.
No, sir. No, ma'am. Upstock is a broker. Grow is a broker. Zerodha is a broker. All the transactions you place there and buying whatever you're buying is connected to an exchange. So we are an exchange by ourselves. So what happens is that buyers and sellers are on our exchange.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for today's VCM. Thank you, Minar Malse, sir, for getting us in touch so that we can conduct today's VCM. So anyone can come forward for vote of thanks, please.
No, before that, thank you so much for coming on a Sunday morning. In these times we spend, taking time out from your family and friends and a lazy Sunday morning to come and listen to cryptocurrency. I hope that, sacrificing a couple of hours was worth it. And I hope to have at least a couple of more accounts on WazirX.com.
Yes, sure, sir. Thank you. Thank you for your time, sir, today. It was really a very nice VCM. Very new things to learn. This whole new world is, people have some myths and also, I guess, at least some of the myths which were there are clear now. Shikha ma'am is also here, deputy convener. Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, you're on mute.
No, ma'am, we can't hear you. Shikha ma'am, nahi sunai de rahe.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
I think problem with the headphone. Thank you, sir, for giving the insight of this new word, because for me it was very new. I was not aware about it. Thanks for introducing this and giving all the insights about this cryptocurrency. So definitely, I think there will be lots of opportunities for CAs also going forward. What do you say for that?
Bilkul. Because CAs are the advisors to the middle class, on where to invest your monies. So which is why this is critical. And the primary purpose of this class this session was to dispel a few myths. So by no means was this comprehensive. We would urge you to start reading upon it. And lastly, if Minar is on the call, thank you so much for arranging this. It's been very, very helpful. Sadamini and I and WazirX, on behalf of WazirX, thank you so much. Thanks, Pankaj, and thank you, Shikha ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, both of you, for giving your valuable time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Pankaj.